All right, all right. Hello, ladies. Back to another weekly Animatron webinar. I'm your personal Animatron guru, Bryce, and I'll be guiding you through today's topic of interest. It just so happens that it is the season for the Halloween happiness at the end of this month. So what we're going to do today is review basically how I would set up, how I would go about creating an animated holiday postcard. And why I'm doing this is because it also lines up with our very first Animatron Halloween holiday postcard contest that you guys can be a part of as long as you submit your own animated postcards before this month, October the 23rd by midnight. You guys can have a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And I believe we have an annual Animatron subscription for you guys too. So I will, let's see, I'll drop this in chat for you guys. Let's see, where is it? We have a blog post for you guys to check out for all of the information, and I will post this into chat so you guys can go discover that right now. And those will be all the details you need to essentially build and submit your very own Halloween animated postcard. And we look forward to getting your submissions, and it should be a pretty fun contest for you guys to enter. If you guys are brand new to Animatron and you're totally unfamiliar with our software, whether it's the interface or tools or terminology that you don't understand, which can be found at the bottom of this live stream underneath in the description area below. You may have to scroll down to the description area and click on show more. And at the very bottom of the description, it'll say, it'll give you a link, a hyperlink to our YouTube channel that will bring you directly to that tutorials playlist. And you guys can go check out all the basic introductory tutorials on how to figure out how to use Animatron and get started with using it on a daily basis. So as a reminder, I'd like everybody to know that at the end of each one of these webinar demos, I like to have this little live Q&A session for you guys. So if you are interested in asking me any questions, I do ask that you throw those into chat. For those of you guys with topic-related questions, go ahead and shoot those through chat so that I can answer them as I go along with my demo. Since today is very particular, you can really ask me anything as long as it coincides with what I'm attempting to achieve at the time, whether it's with text or with animating certain portions of my scene. But otherwise, if you have any off-topic questions, something that you're particularly struggling with, I ask that you hold those questions off to the very end for our live Q&A session so that it's not, I'm not getting sidetracked throughout the demo today. So with all of that said, I would like to get right to it. All I need to do is share my screen here. So give me just a second. And you guys should be able to now see, yeah, you guys should be able to see my screen now. I have Animatron open. So if you haven't already logged in, make sure you log in. Your login name will be right here where my cursor is. And then just to get like a brand new project. Now, as we're waiting for this to load, it's important to think about how a postcard is put together in general. So as a little hint for you guys to get yourself started on what to think about first and what to develop to create your little animated postcard is honestly go to a retail store and look through their little holiday postcard kiosks. And you'll be able to find some clever ideas for what the Halloween season calls for and what kind of graphics you'd like to use, what kind of theme you'd like to go with. and just start populating some ideas to yourself of how you could present the text, how you could present the backgrounds and the animated objects within. So to get you started really relatively quickly without having to create anything from scratch, Animatron has this marketplace. I'm sure I've talked about the marketplace many times before, but it's always good to click through it every once in a while. We keep populating new assets every week to it. The library is found here on the bottom left-hand side. You can click on this little marketplace icon, and you'll get this menu in the inspector panel right here. And you'll see at the top we have our market open. And you can search for any key terms, anything related to Halloween specifically should be tagged. If it's not, then you can just click through each one of these individual categories below and try to get an idea of what's in here. So let's stage our very first scene here. Since it is an animated holiday postcard, you want everything to essentially have some animation to it. Unfortunately, we don't currently have some Halloween background sets yet, or animated Halloween sets yet, but you can have a backgrounds category. So what you can do is click on backgrounds, and we have a number of backgrounds from our animated sets, but at the bottom, we do have some static sets. Just got to let it load here for a bit, and we can scroll down. I'm just using the mouse wheel to find my way to the bottom. And anyone who has looked through our marketplace before should recognize some of these older background sets. But we do have one here, and I'll click and drag my background to the stage. So just by holding down left click and dragging, you can see basically a preview of what this background is going to look like. So I'm going to click and drag and then let go of left click, and it will snap to the background for us. And this gives us a nice little setting. You know, it's got the haunted moon, the colors, the everything Halloween style attached to it, 2 pumpkins that we can play around with later and try to make it our own essentially. So this is a great idea for you guys who really have don't have any assets in mind to start out with. You can just drag and drop your backgrounds or your objects on here. Now to expand on just having a background, and you'll see after I dragged and dropped this to the canvas, in our layers panel, it has dropped the background as Halloween. And you'll see this, I'll highlight it for you. So you see it in our layers panel. And what's great about all of these backgrounds is they're made out of multiple components. So, you know, the pumpkins, the headstone, the moon, the mountains, the fence line, the vines, everything inside of this, even the ground plane, is a separate object that we can extract and change the color of, or change the position of, or just change the size or proportions of everything in here. We can even add faces to these pumpkins. So that's the first thing. You can always extract projects if they are in the public library, in the public gallery. And that's a great way to get ideas from what everybody else is doing. And I'll show you this real quick. I'll just go, let's see. I'll go back to the main page here and go to our gallery by clicking on the Explore tab. And currently the Explore tab brings you to our public library. And if you want to look for anything Halloween specific, the power of having these projects posted in our gallery is that you can search for them with common key terms. So you can click on this little search dialog, this little button here on the top right-hand side. And I'll just type in Halloween, and we can get an idea of what everybody else has been working on for these postcards or for the Halloween season, whatever they're developing on their own. So it seems like a lot of people like to use the background that I just sampled, and they're using a lot of the stamps. There's a couple of familiar things in here. You got a scary hand. So you can get an idea from here what other people are doing. If you see something you really, really like and you really, really know you'll be able to copy them. Let's go back to the top and see what we have here. So we have one here with the scary hand. So what you can do is click on the preview thumbnail, watch through it. If it has any audio attached to it, it'll play through. All right, so you got some creepy sound coming along here, and the hand movement. And if you find it in the public gallery, you know you can copy it or duplicate it for your own use if you see these tabs here at the bottom left. So underneath the preview, you'll see these tabs, edit and duplicate. If the user has enabled the duplicate option or a copyable option in his sharing and privacy settings on his project, you will be able to duplicate anything in this scene and essentially duplicate his project. So I'll click on duplicate, all right, and it gives me this little information screen. Project has been duplicated with the name copy from website. So this is just a generic title for copying it. And since it's not going to bring you over to your own account, it lets you know that the project has been duplicated and the new name of it is copy from website. So once it's been duplicated, I'll hit OK. With this preview window, you can click anywhere outside in the grayed out area, and it will bring you back to the gallery. And I'll scroll back to the top, and since it duplicated it to my personal gallery, I can always just click on my my account name here at the top right, left click on it, it'll bring you to your personal gallery. And you should see here at the top left, at the top left of my thumbnails, that it has copied that same project to my personal gallery. And again, it says copy from website is the name of the project. So in order to gather the assets from that project, I can click on it, again, on the preview thumbnail. I'll pause it so we're not hearing that same audio again. And then since it is my project, you'll see here at the bottom, the title of our project is copy from website. So if you want to, right away, you can go ahead and inside of this, click on the title and change it yourself. And I'll just say Halloween hand. Hit enter, and it will change the title for us. And then what you'll see right below here is the profile image of the person who first created it, right? This is the original author of the project. So Clue, thank you for lending us your creepy haunted hand. And then because I duplicated it, I have now become the owner of this project. So you'll see my name next to owned by, which generally just means it's a part of my personal account. So nobody else can access this unless I unlock it for them to use as well. And since I now have this in my account, I can click on edit and wait for our editor to load up. And I'll be able to see all of the components that this person has used to animate this object. And if you see down here at the layers panel, it has also imported the audio along with it. So that gives us some good use for the audio to have audio sampling in our background of our project. But what I wanted to show you is because I duplicated this project, I found this hand, this creepy animated hand, really interesting. So what I can do is grab group one. Group one is the hand. You can tell by looking at the little layer thumbnail down in our layers panel. It looks like the hand. So generally what I would do with any time I created an asset, especially if it's an animated asset, it's something I really want to hold on to and be able to remember what it's called. I always like to rename my layers. So I'm going to say haunting hand to animation. Haunting hand animation for the name of that layer. And then another good habit to get into is automatically going over to your project library. Again, go to this little tab, the marketplace icon. Go up to the top of your inspector panel where it says project library. Click on it. And you'll see this person has already saved a bunch of assets to. He even has the audio files attached to his project library. and he has the image background to his project. So what I can do is take the entire animated hand itself by clicking it on the layer panel, and then clicking this little plus symbol inside of my project library, and it has now added this animated hand to my library that I can reuse over and over again. So if I really wanted to have multiple hands in the scene or coming out from different locations in my background, I can use this time and time again just by dragging and dropping it from my project library. So the power of Animatron is that it's open inside of a web browser. And when you have things open in your web browser, most of this stuff transfers over to other projects as long as you have them open open on your computer. So if you remember, I have this original file, right? This is where we dragged in the background, and I just clicked on my tab up here. Just so we know what we're looking at, I'm going to click on my project and give it a name, and I'll just say this is Holiday Postcard Holiday Postcard Example. So that's, this is the one that we're currently working on. We want to bring all of our assets to this, this project. So what this means is, under my current account, I have 2 projects open. I currently have the project I just duplicated and the one I created with my background that I would like to use. So again, the power of Animatron is that because it's in a web browser, you can copy from one project open in its own tab. So what I mean by that is I'll select my hand. I want to copy this and then paste into my project from my layers panel, because I want to grab everything that's involved with the animation and with the styling of the hand. I'll hit Control C. For you guys on Mac computers, you'll hit Command C for copy. So now that I have copied to the clipboard, I can go back to my original holiday postcard example, right-click on my layers panel, and paste in place. Oh, I seem to have found something that is not working properly at the moment, which happens to be copying the assets from one to another. But another thing I believe we might be able to do here, everything that's selectable in Animatron generally copies and pastes. Oh, same thing. Okay, so that'll be a difficult hurdle for us to cross over. So something is happening where it's not actually pasting the asset itself, it's just pasting the clip that's attached to it. So I'll try doing it this way through our context menu. I'll copy it from here. Let's see, maybe paste it in here. Nope, same thing. Okay, so that's something that we won't be able to get to, but what you can take from this is that saving these to your own projects is pretty quick and painless, just to your own project library. And if you find something that you want to build on, you can build on it from here. We will get this fixed where you can copy it to your clipboard and paste it into the other project. Just so happens that right now it's not functioning properly. So we'll get past that. We had this cool little animation for us, but unfortunately we can't use it at the time. So what I'm going to do is open up my background, and I'll show you how I'll customize one of these pumpkins. So each background that comes in, you can unlock it, right? It came in locked. And if you click on the little lock icon, you can unlock the layer. And by hovering over the layer thumbnail, the preview thumbnail of this Halloween layer, you'll see this little pencil show up where I can edit the group, which means I can isolate all of the assets inside of this background. And I'll click on it, and you'll see it takes me inside of the background, and I can see all of the elements, and you'll find that better by looking at the layers themselves. So I'll just click and drag my layers here so we can see everything involved. So I'll just click through each layer and see what gets selected. This says ground, so I'm guessing that's the ground element. And if you want to, you can click and drag the entire asset across the canvas to see what's actually attached to that layer. And because I see multiple parts to the layer, I can go to my layer thumbnail, and it shows me that I can now click on just the ground plane again. And if I wanted to, I could go as deep into this this particular asset as I wanted to, this asset being the ground plane. And I can click on each individual component, right? So now I have the grass, right? Our spooky haunted grass. And because it is one shape, generally when you create shapes in Animatron, they are saved as layers, but they are shape layers that create their own title tags. So it'll say shape 1, shape 2, shape 3 every single time you create a new one. And then the power of being able to go inside of these grouped layers is that now I can select individual components to it and change things like the color. And if I selection tool, and I can actually zoom in here so we can get a better idea of the shapes that are going on. And I can click and drag out my my own shapes from this. So if I decided that these little chunks of grass, I'm going to say, I really have no clue what it's actually supposed to be, but I'm going to say this is haunted grass or creep. So you can go in and directly edit all of these points from the shape because it is a shape layer. So now I can make a few changes. If I go back to my selection tool, I can click on the fill color and change the color of this ground plane. So if I wanted to make it a bit of a bloodier red color and maybe make it a little bit creepier to look at, I'll give this a brighter tone. Yeah, let's go with orange. Orange looks nice. So then I can go through each one of these shapes and do the same thing. Right, so now I can add my own custom colors, click on the ones that I want to use. If these colors aren't working out for you, you can always change the hue, which is the exact color pattern of it, by sliding this little color tab or this color slider here. And if you wanted to, you can click off of palette view, and there's this little tag here on our color picker. At the very bottom says palette view. So I can click off of that, and it gives me a millions of color sample. So now I can click through individual points on our color sampler and come up with something that's a little. In this case, I want to go a little bit darker, maybe more orange. Okay, that looks good. And just click back to get back to our assets. So now I've changed the color of our ground plane or whatever this creepy haunted grass is. And in order to get back to the background itself, I can just click through my breadcrumbs. So up at the top here you'll see these tabbed arrows where currently I'm inside of ground 12. And I can click on Halloween, which was my entire background, and it will bring me back to the entire list of assets that we've just looked at. So now I've changed the color of the background. Ideally, if you want to continue the color of the background with everything else, you can go through each one of these assets. The fence color, the composite looks like mountains. You can always hide them and unhide them to see exactly what they're affecting. We have our composite for our moon in the background. Now, what's cool about this is because I can select individual assets, I can now animate them and have them play over time. So because I'm in here and I can grab the moon, I'll just do a simple, moon rising. So I'll drag my playhead to 5 seconds, right-click on the time band of my moon, and I'll just rename it moon so we know what we're changing here. So I'll right click at the, let's say 5-second mark and insert keyframe. Now what this does is it saves the exact position and scale and everything that's involved with the current position and movement of this moon at the 5-second mark, which allows me to go back to the 0-second mark, which is my frame, down behind the mountains. Let's do like an angle maybe like that. And if you play this back, I'll just hit enter. Now we have a slowly rising moon in the background, right? So it's as simple as going in and selecting each one of these individual components, and now you can change various things about them. Another portion of this may be the grave itself, right? The headstone. So nothing's going on with the headstone at the time, but you can see this is a complex object. I'll zoom in on it. And I can click on the layer thumbnail again for grave and isolate the grave or the headstone itself. And what I want to do is make this headstone shake. So I'll try to pick out which portions of the headstone I want to have moving. So what I'll do is I'll hide and unhide the things that I see that look like they would all belong together. So I have the half moon, right? So I'll try to grab these and the headstone itself. Okay, and that creates essentially the entire headstone itself by selecting these few objects. So if you want to keep these things together, these headstone objects, you can select them on your layers panel, and you'll see just by holding down control and clicking on each individual layer, I can select a separated group of those layers. To keep them together but on the same timeline, I can go to this little button here. It's the fourth one over just above our layers panel, called Combine Layers. And what this does is it just groups them into a stack. And you'll see once I clicked on that, the stack has renamed itself to layer 1. And I'll say is let's just say headstone. So I'll rename the entire group headstone. And then with these combined layers, it gives you this little gray triangle to the left of the preview thumbnail. And what this means is I can reveal all of the nested layers that belong to this entire group layer above it. And again, every time that you are editing your assets on your canvas, make sure that you're renaming the layers. Because when you ever have an instance, just exactly what I'm trying to do right now, to go into assets that have already been produced, if somebody else were to go into your project and try to figure your way around, it's difficult to figure out what exact shapes you're trying to select. So always make a habit of naming your layers, naming your project. Anything you can name, give it a name, because it will definitely help you later on when you're trying to make changes to it later. So with that said, I'm going to select my new combined layer, or let's say this is our group layer. And because it grouped all of them above the shadow, I believe shape 3 was a headstone shadow. Oh, that's one shadow. And there's the other one. So I just had to put it back into place where all of those assets are below, or in this case, behind. You'll see we have like a little bit of the grass ground plane here, and then the, I guess, what looks at the back side of the headstone. So in combining the headstone, final animated shaking effect to make it look like the gravestone is being undone from the ground. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I have a nice pivot point for where the shaking of the headstone will rotate from. So I'm going to select my pivot point. Again, when you're animating, when you're adding keyframes to your timeline, make sure that your animation tab is selected. So you see up here where my cursor is, if it's in design mode, it's not going to save your keyframes to the timeline. So if I change something here and I move it, it did not apply a keyframe to my timeline. So in design mode, whenever you move something, that's its permanent location. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're animating exactly at that point. So I'll go to like 0.5 seconds, because let's say that's the first keyframe we want to place. I'll select my pivot point, which is this central point of the object as it's selected. By clicking on it once, you'll see it highlight in that yellow-orange color. And without moving the mouse around, you can click and drag that pivot point. So let's say it's coming from about here, where the rotation will happen. So now, anytime that I click my rotation handle, and that's this little guy above it, it'll shake from that position. Or sorry, it should rotate from that position. So what I can do is find a fun position for it to shake to, right? So that's our first rotation. I'll go to frame 1 by clicking on it there. I'll grab my pivot point again and drag it to the same spot and rotate this way. So what you can do is keep rotating your object from that central pivot point that you've designated for the entire group object. And we'll get a couple more different varying shakes in here. So here I'll grab my pivot point again, shake one more time in one direction, rotate, and now I have this shaking headstone. So 1, 2, 3. And you'll notice that after this last keyframe at 1.5 seconds, right? So I have 1, 2, 3 keyframes we just added, and you keep going past it, right? I'm scrubbing through my timeline. Nothing's happening. It just happens once. So what we could do in order to have this be a looping effect, right? This is something that will continue to happen without any interaction involved or without any end result. It's just the shaking headstone. If I was able to get that animated arm to work, right, this guy here, I would be able to have it shake and then have the arm maybe bust through in one of the corners and make it look like there's a zombie popping up out of the ground. So that would have been really fun. But to avoid having to animate an entire hand in this project, we'll just use that as a for instance. So since we just have a shaking headstone, I want to find a point where this will be good to have it pause for a short while. So to give this a more accurate playback, I'm going to bring my playhead back to 0 seconds and hit enter. And you can see how much the headstone shakes, right? For 1.5 seconds. It's not a lot. And honestly, for my purposes, I like it to shake a little bit quicker to make it more noticeable to the human eye when you're watching this as a viewer. So what I can do to make this happen quicker, I've already created my keyframes. So instead of trying to reposition them manually, you can scale. And the way I'll do that is I'll right click on the last keyframe that I've placed, change end action, and I'll just stop it. So it'll animate and then disappear. But the point of doing this is that now, if you zoom out of your timeline far enough, and you've selected your group layer, right, headstone, you hover over the end of your time band, you'll see this blue handle show up with the 2 vertical white lines. This means that you can reposition the end of this animation. So what I want to do is actually scale it. I want to make it happen quicker. So I'll hold down the Shift key on my keyboard, hold down left click, not zoomed out far enough. Again, zoom out, hold down the Shift key. So sometimes this is a little tricky with the smaller Sometimes this gets a little tricky with the smaller time bands where it's not actually allowing you to catch the handle. So this is another thing that we have to work out and make sure that this works properly every time. So instead of it actually scaling the time band, what it's doing is it's trying to select the last keyframe in place. So I'm not going to fuss with that anymore. But the idea is that you can speed up your animation. And the end result would be just repositioning each one of these keyframes at an earlier point in time. And by doing so, you'd be able to make this happen quicker. So once you've shortened the animation, which means it's going to play quicker, right? It happens more when you're going back to view it again. So after this, I can go back to my change end action button, and you'll see at the end of my time band, there's this little gray square that represents the stop action. I can click on it. I can hit stay, and now it will stay permanently on my timeline. It won't disappear like it was before. Have it shake and stay. But for the point of us being able to use this as a looping animation, I want it to pause for a bit. I don't want it to continue to shake. I just want it to shake a little bit, pause for a while, let's say 4 seconds. And I'll right click at the 4-second mark, change end action, and loop. And what this does is when you see it played back, it's going to shake, pause for a little bit, and then once it loops again, it'll shake and pause, and it will do the same thing over and over and over again. If you wanted to make this happen at different speeds at different times, you would have to duplicate, right? So what I would actually end up doing is stopping the end action, right? Make this a stop end action. Select my layer, and then duplicate the layer. And by duplicating it, I can create a brand new instance of it and then drag it to the very end where it meets up with the first copy of this, first version of it. And I can just make the pause happen for a shorter period of time. And then from here, I can duplicate it again. I can drag this out to the end. So you can see where you can make this a bit more customizable, where it's not just looping. And you can make more designer. You can change the rate at which things occur. So I'll make the shake happen a little bit quicker on this third version of it. And then if you wanted to, you just wanted it to shake 3 times up to the 8-second mark, you can click on the very last change end action and make it stay. So what you'll get is slow shake, at a 4-second pause, 3-second pause. It'll shake again, 2-second pause, shake quick, and it will stay that way, right? Infinity. It will go to infinity and it will not shake again. So that's how you can kind of control your individual animations, and just make sure that the last one in place, your last headstone copy, is on a stay end action, which means it will literally stay visible for infinity until you're ready to end the movie. So that's how we do the custom shake on the gravestone. So let's leave this animation as is, and I'll go back to my background scene. Again, go up to your breadcrumbs up at the top. I'll click on Halloween. All right, and this will bring us back to our background Halloween scene, where now, if I play, you have the moon rising, and you have our headstone shaking a little bit in place, right? And it shakes 3 times, and nothing happens after that. So since the moon has stopped at 5 seconds, obviously you can have this play out to the very end of where your scene will stop. So what I'll say is, let's go to 10 seconds with this. So it'll take longer to get into position. You'll see it's a little slower this time around. So that means at 10 seconds, the moon will stop in place. The headstone has shaked 3 times. And then let's do something special with our pumpkins to make this a little bit more interesting to look at. And then I'll get into text. Text is really the part that a lot of people aren't sure how to go about using. So let's start with our pumpkin here on the right-hand side. Again, just select it. I just made a lucky guess in choosing that this was the pumpkin that we're changing. And again, always rename the assets that you are using or making changes to, or once you've finalized it. It's a good habit to get into renaming that. So I want to isolate my pumpkin, make sure that I can draw on it from the inside of its group. So I'll hover over its thumbnail again, click on it so I can isolate this one object. And I'll zoom in on my pumpkin object. And what I can do is to create a basic shape that I can fill in later, I'll use my pencil tool. I'll select the topmost layer on my layers panel. And I will use the pencil tool to draw a simple eye shape. Oh, it didn't seem to want to go. Okay, so I'll draw with my pencil tool the eye shape that I want this to appear as. And I'll just draw a quick little face. Let's see, we should give this guy some smoochy lips, because who doesn't love smoochy lips on our pumpkins? All right, best pair of smoochy lips I've ever drawn. So we're just going to stick with this. And in order to change these shapes, and you'll see on my layers panel that every single time I applied a pencil shape, it has created a new layer. So in order to keep them all in the same place, I can shift select them on my layers panel, right? Hold down shift and select all of the pencil shapes and combine the layers together. So that way I can just keep them in one location. My layers panel isn't all piled up with individual pencil drawing shapes. And I've created a basic outline using my pencil tool. So what I can do is select the layer, and because they're all individual pencil shapes, this is where I can use my union tool. And what this is what we consider our pathfinder. And these little 2 shaded squares up here, probably a very seldom used tool, but in this case works very well for us. So what I want to do is make sure I selected my combine layer, go up here, click on these double squares, and then if you look through each one of them, they will give you an idea based on the icon what these actually do. So a pathfinder essentially is a Boolean method which will either add, subtract, divide, or add, divide, multiply, or subtract. So the very one on the left, where on that's my add tool, and it will combine all of those shapes that I had selected on my combine layer. So what this allows me to do now, I'll lock my pumpkin shape so I'm not destroying it. I'll get rid of that empty layer. Now I can zoom in. Whoa. Now I can zoom in on the shapes that I've just created and really start to plan out the way that these shapes are going to appear. So what I can do is go through and delete all the unwanted nodes. And this is how I'm going to make my custom shapes. Instead of having to use actual shapes or shape tools like the circle and rectangle tool, I can now click and drag out these nodes and get a more custom shape. So I'll just go through each one of these. Again, whenever you're editing lines, you can hold down either the Control, Alt, or Shift key while dragging out the line, and they will do separate things. So holding down one of the Bezier handles, right, these little handles that stick off the nodes, I can hold down Shift. Right? I can hold down Control, and it makes it uniform. I can hold down, or sorry, I can hold Alt and click the node, and that will essentially break the two Bezier handles. So this gives you a lot more individual control over your custom shapes. So again, I'll just go around here and get rid of the ones that I do want and the ones that I don't want. And the shapes that we're creating. So instead of spending a whole lot of additional time doing that, I'll just show you with the eye. With the object selected, you can actually use your bucket tool. As long as these lines are fully connected, you can use the bucket. Select the layer first. Select the color you'd like to add with the, oops, it's not working the right way. Oh, here we go. Okay, so our fill color, I'll select the fill color I want, and let's just say it's a nice bright yellow. And I'll click hide the pumpkin. Let's see if that'll work. Yeah, okay. So with the pumpkin hidden, I can now click on each individual color here. And we can come up with something that's a bit more favorable to what we're trying to achieve. So let's see, maybe we can go with the darker color and fill in these empty spaces. There we go. Okay, so just to give you an idea of the shapes you can draw out here. Again, since I've been adding with the paint bucket tool, I can select them all on my layers, combine the layers together, and now these layers are the fill color for the pumpkin. So I'll bring my pumpkin layer back, I'll unhide it, and now I have essentially a basic cutout for my eyes and my pumpkin's lips. And if you want to see how this looks and the end result, we can always go back to the background. And since my pumpkin in my background is a little lower on the ground plane underneath it, I can grab the selection tool and I can select it on my layer and drag it up a little bit so we see a bit more of this guy. All right. So again, that's going in and creating custom shapes. Now, one more cool effect you can do with the colors, now that we've added these cutout face shapes on our pumpkin, we can go back into the pumpkin. Since we have saved these colors on a combine layer, what I can do is select the combine layer, click on the fill color of the combine layer, and change all of these colors at the same time. So if I wanted to, again, with our animation tab selected, I can go through at different times. So I'll change my playhead to, let's say, 0.4 seconds, click on my fill color, change it to a bright yellow, go to, let's say, 0.8 seconds and change it to a dark color, orange. And you'll see the effect I'm getting here kind of looks like a candle flicker. So this is a great way to go in and make it look a little bit more alive, even though it's a static object, right? This pumpkin is not moving, it's just flickering. Or we're giving it the perception of a candle flicker just by changing the color. We're actually keyframing the colors inside of it. With my millions of colors, I have the availability of actually making this a bit more unique in the color variation. So I can make it a little bit darker, a little bit brighter. And all of these keyframes will continue to work. And since I've made a couple keyframes, and this is a candle flicker, we can just have this repeat over and over again, just like our gravestone repeats and shakes. We can have this continually flicker in the background. So again, to do this, right-click on the last keyframe of the layer that is just the cutout, which is our layer 3, which happens to be all the fill colors. Change end action, right-click on it, change end action, and loop. And what this does will, on playback, we'll get a better idea of what it's actually doing. And I'll hit enter. And you'll see that it will continue to flicker over and over again. If I wanted to make this look a bit more natural, instead of it looping the same thing over and over again, another thing you can try is reversing it. So I'll click on my change end action icon. Right now it's the loop icon. And I'll just change it to reverse. So what this does is it will play it forward to the end of the animation that is looping, and then it will play again, but backwards. So if I hit play, you'll see it goes through all of the same colors, but reverse every single time. So it looks like a more natural candle flicker going back and forth. So after I've changed my candle flicker, I can go back to my background under Halloween, get a better viewpoint, and hit enter again for my playback, and we can see all of our animations working at the same time. So I have my headstone shaking, I have my moon rising in the background to 10 seconds, and then because the candle flicker in my pumpkin is, it will go and movie has stopped. So we have a little bit more action going on, and this all generated from one of our static background images. So you can now see the power that you get out of Animatron just from having these assets grouped together, individualized. You know, you can really add that custom flair to each one of these assets. So I'm happy with my background image. The one thing that I want to finish up on is animated text. Text in general, I'll go back to my the top of my scene because I'm done with my background. Actually, I will call this background. Rename it, lock it. Every time you're done with an asset on the canvas, make sure you lock it because there are moments in time, especially when you have the animation tab on, that if you just nudge it a little bit, it will save that nudge as a keyframe. So then you'll have this background inadvertently moving just a tiny bit throughout the entire animation. It may not be noticeable at first, but when you render it, it will be a lot more apparent. So always make a habit of locking down any of the assets or layers that you don't plan on moving anymore. So now I can actually marquee select across my canvas, and I won't disturb any of those background elements. So where I was before with text. So I'll select my text tool, and we'll add a simple little word in here, and we'll just say who this is from. Or let's say who this is to, right? This is our postcard. So because everything else in my background is dark, I want to make sure that my text stands out. So I just changed my fill color of my text to white. So when I start typing, I'll be able to see what I'm actually typing. So I'll just say to. And this is to my friendly, no, not my friendly, my haunted Halloween Buddies. And I'll hit enter. Oops. Sorry, just click off of it to complete it. I'll grab my selection tool, so now I can reposition it if I need to. So now I have my text, right, to my Haunted Halloween Buddies, but my font is not very exceptional. I want this to kind of uphold the Halloween spirit with the font style that we choose. Now, what's cool about Animatron is that we have sourced a lot of web-based fonts for you to begin with. So when you have this layer selected, right, this is my text layer. At the very top of our inspector panel, you'll see the font, right? Right now it's called Verdana. That's the font name. And you can click on this, and it will give you our library of web-based fonts. And just by scrolling through here for a little bit, you'll see how many we actually have. It's virtually endless. However, there are some custom fonts that you may decide to bring in to your project. So what you can do is actually import. You click on our import button at the top right. And because we accept fonts, you'll see here at the bottom, we support these font formats, TTF, OTF, and WOFF. You can go to any one of your online font distributors and find the font you want, download it, and import it right into Animatron. And what happens is once you've uploaded that, you can go back to your font list and then go to this tab at the top of our font, like upload, select that, and it will apply itself automatically. And then again, to look at our fonts a bit deeper, if you find something you want to reuse on multiple pieces of text or multiple sections of text, so I'll just scroll through here until I see something nice. Spicy rice regular, that looks cool. So in order to get these to load quickly, what you can do is click on them. Sometimes they don't load perfectly. See, this didn't load in right away, but you can select it, select something else, and then go back to it, and it will come in the way that the font actually appears. So you have to really force it to load for you to see the preview of it. So you can click on these. Again, there's this little scroll tab on the right, makes it easier to go up through the alphanumeric list that we have here. And you can really find some cool font in here, but you want to make it legible, right? Everybody loves papyrus font. So let's see if there's anything spooky. You can always click on the search tab and see spooky. Enter. So we don't have any font that says that's a spooky font. Let's say haunted. You can use more generic terms, maybe horror. No. So you can just hit, or you can just type in a letter that you might know of a font already in its place. So right here, we see Henry Penny Regular. That looks pretty cool. So I can type in H, and it will give me every font name that starts with an H. So this is really quick way of locating certain letter-based fonts that you'd like to use. So again, click on it, click off of it, click on again. So this looks pretty whimsical and in the holiday spirit. So I'll use this, Henny Penny Regular. And in order to use this later, I can click on this little star to the left of the text, or sorry, to the left of the font name. And it seems my browser has frozen. Oh, there we go. So I'll click on the star so I can favorite it. And what this means is when I go into my favorites list, it's going to be in there for me to select later if I create a new string of font, or sorry, a new string of text. So it'll be a quick way for me to get back to this exact font when I create a new piece of text. So now that I'm done, I'll click back. You can change the exact font size. If it does have regular or italicized or underscored or any custom style to the font alternative to the Henny Penny by itself. You would find that under this drop-down menu. You have your bold, italicize, and underline. So you can use any one of those. You can center your text or force it to the left or the right of the text field. And just like any, really any text tool, you can use these the exact same way. But what I want to get to is how to actually animate it. A lot of people don't realize that the font itself, the text, the way that it works, or as it's rendered through the web, when it comes time to render it at the end, because it's text that's animating, the scale is done by the font size. So it looks very weird to the eye. And maybe I can give you an example of this. So let's say I have, and I'll just, let's say, make it animate from 0 seconds to 10 seconds, and I'll move it to the center. And let's rotate it a little bit. And just for good measure, I'll scale it up. Make sure that's inside of my canvas area so we can see the entire piece of font or piece of text. And this is what we have. So this is what the preview gives you, is the text slowly moving. It's scaling into place. It looks good from our preview. So from the Animatron editor itself, it will look great. But when it comes time to render, you'll see that we get these little hitching problems. And that's because of the rendered version of our font. And this happens, sometimes this happens a bit more obvious than others. So right now I'm not really seeing it. But if you ever so happen to have a scaling font that does not look accurate in the animation, then all you have to do is, let me X out of this. First thing I want to do is group my font layer, group my text layer. So I'll select it on my layers panel and hit F8 if you're on a PC. Actually, the F8 should work on both PC and Mac. Sometimes on a Mac, you'll have to hit Function F8 for this to force into a group. And now that I have it grouped, I can rename this. We'll just say this is to text. Right. I'll click on the thumbnail to go inside of it, right, to isolate my text. And I can see the animated text inside. And because it's still click on the canvas, I'll zoom in a bit here. Right click on the canvas and then go to convert text to shape. So what happens is it has now turned my font layer. I keep saying that. I just turned my text layer into a group, but part of the group are individual letters themselves. So I clicked on the thumbnail, the edit thumbnail, so I can find the individual text characters. So T, O, colon, M, Y. So everything is spelled out from top to bottom in individual layers. But what I want to be able to show you here, first what I'm going to do is select all my layers and make sure, so I have to do them one at a time. So what I'll do is I'll center the T. I'll start with the T because I want to reuse one animation over and over again. So I'll click on my center registration, which means that the pivot point automatically snaps to the middle of the T. And I'll do something like, let's see. It'll come in at the 1 second mark. So I'll move my playhead to 1 second, right click, and insert a keyframe. And this holds it in place, basically everything that it is right now. And then when it starts, let's shrink it, rotate it 180 degrees just about. and then I will drop the opacity to 0. So what this means is at the 0-second mark, it's invisible. It's rotated 180 degrees. And as it comes to 1 second, it's 100% its regular size. It's 100% opacity, and it's rotated into place. So that's the animation. If I play it back, just hit enter. And I've animated essentially one character. But I want to apply this to every single character in my text. So what I can do is copy and paste my keyframes to all of the individual pieces of text. In order to do this, I'll hold down Control on PC. On Mac, you hold down Command. Click and drag to select the keyframes that make up the animation for my T. And I'll right-click on each one or any one of the keyframes and then go to Copy Keyframes. So I can literally just use the shortcut Control-C or Command-C to copy them. Click on my O, right, the O of my 2, and right-click on the very first keyframe, paste keyframes, or just hit Control-V. And it pastes them, you'll see it pastes them wherever my playhead was located at the time. So I'm going to undo that. I want to go back to the 0-second mark. If you noticed, right, I'll bring that back. If you notice, you'll see now that the 2 is out of location because I didn't center the registration. So this is a very important thing to remember. If the first animation on the T was a centered registration, it's going to be rotating it from the pivot point of this new object. So what I'm basically trying to say is every time that you prepare to apply or paste keyframes onto these characters first, bring your playhead to where you want to paste the keyframes, right-click, and paste keyframes. So now I have my T and my O both showing up in the same spot. Now you see that my T and my O both are now in the same position. This is virtually unavoidable because it's pasting the original position of the T. But what I can do is first hold down left click on the time band and push it forward so they don't happen at the same time. And go back to design mode and just click and drag the O back to its original position. Right, so this is a very quick way to have the T show up, the O show up, and I would literally go through each one of these, right? Let's say the colon is here. I can drag it into position first, make sure it's central registration, right-click on the first keyframe, paste keyframes, right-click, paste keyframes, and now I have the same effect with my colon. And with design mode on, right, because design mode, we're not adding keyframes, we're not making changes. I'm literally just changing the position of where the colon is supposed to be located. And I'll move that into position. So it'll keep the animation central to where I just relocated to. So after I've put that in there, I'll lock my layer, go to the next one, go to the next one, drag it, central registration, click on the keyframe, right-click, paste keyframes, and make sure that it is located where I want it to be. Right, to my... All right, so I would do the same thing over and over again. It may seem a little bit tedious, but that's how you're going to be able to customize the text for each one of the characters that you want your text to actually animate to. So I would go through each one of these and apply them to each one of the new pieces of text. But instead of doing that, I'll just go back to the very beginning where we see our text located. It has animated, right? It kept the animation from my initial portion, but if I play through, you'll see the first few characters pop into place how we animated them before. And then to essentially end how you're going to add keyframe easing, for those of you who don't know what keyframe easing is, I'll go back into my individual characters. Keyframe easing, you just right-click between two keyframes, set easing, and you can change the in and out point of how fast or how smooth my M will animate into place. So I'll just do in and out, right? I'll have these checked on. If you didn't want them to be both in and out, quadratic animation, you can uncheck it. So it's more of a harsh settling into place. Or you can do just out. So it kind of really quickly pops up and then softens into place. So that seems pretty cool. So that's an out and a quad. So what I can do is go back into each character that I've animated already, right-click between the keyframes, set easing. I want to uncheck in, out, and quad. And go back, lock it because I'm done adding the easing to it. I'll go to my O, right-click, set easing, uncheck in, click on quad. And so each one of my character, my text character animations is going to have this soft entry to where it shows up in the entire string of animation. The reason that I stagger them like this, right? So the T shows up first, and then the O comes in at 0.5 seconds, the colon comes in at 1, and the M comes in at 1.5 seconds, is that you can space these out as best you can, but they will come in when one after another. So it'll actually make the entire animation look smooth when all of these are applied. So now that I've done that, I'll just go all the way back to my top scene. I'll play it back so I can see my keyframe easing in action. Zoom in a little bit here and just hit enter. So you see my text characters come into view, and they animate pretty nice compared to just having them slowly moving into place. So in order to end this whole thing, right, this is just a small segment of information on how to begin creating your own animated holiday postcards. You could do this, which is your to line, right? So to whoever. If you are doing a party invite or you're just saying hello for the holidays, so you would initially, tell the person, who this is for. You can do a whole other scene or just continue on from here, have the text stop at some point, and then add a new line of text that is now animated individually, and just have it say, you'll call for a party invitation, give them all the specifics about the where and the when of the party, and then obviously tell them who it's from. So just to wrap this up, because we are running pretty past time here. I didn't realize it was going to take this long to show off those few things. What this is all wrapping up to, and Brobor, I have basically just give you an example of what this animated postcard is for you guys to create your own and enter it into our very first Animatron Halloween animated postcard contest. And if you look at chat, I've posted that into place for our blog. So we have a blog post that gives you all the details. Again, that's up in the chat window here. That gives you all the details of your submission, the exact criteria for your submission, what should be in it, what should be shown, when it's due by. The deadline is midnight on the 23rd of October. So we'll have some time to judge those. And the end result is the top 3 people will walk away with prizes. The very top prize is a $100 gift card and an annual pro subscription for Animatron. So if you guys would like to continue your animating styles, it would be very cool to keep up with seeing your awesome animations posted on our site. And then again, we will spotlight your animated postcard. So before I leave before we get into the live Q&A session, I'd just like to tell you about these postcards for the contest. Make sure that you are using any images if you are taking graphics off of the web. So if you are going to Google and you're looking for this sake, I'm going to do free Halloween PNGs. So for anybody who is looking for images to use to create your postcards, make sure you look for PNG images or SVG images. So PNG images have transparent backgrounds. So if you click on any one of these, once the image is fully loaded in, let's see if it actually does load in. If you have a PNG image that you find that you want to have a transparent background so you're not getting these frame borders, you're going to see these gray and white grid marks behind it. So that shows you that it has a transparent background, so that when you bring this in to our Animatron editor, you won't have to deal with making any changes to it to make it fit into your scene. So just to give you an example, I'll use this pumpkin. Make sure I save this pumpkin. Actually, what I'm going to do is drag and drop it into one of my folders. Oop, don't want to go to the blog. But I'll go back to my file here. And if you want to, you can drag and drop your pumpkin onto your scene. And because it had those white and gray background checker marks, you can see that there is a transparent background. You don't, you'll be able to see past the border of this pumpkin. So if you wanted to use any assets or image assets from Google, make sure that they are free. We do want to make sure to respect all the other graphic designers and animators out there who've created these hard worked on assets, so that we're not really taking them away from them. And also, if you do take any of them that are not free, make sure to credit the artists. We're not being, these postcards are not being monetized, which means that nobody is paying for them. But it is always a good habit to get into when you're using other people's graphics, that you give them some form of credit for it. So for whoever has created this pumpkin for us that we used for this little demonstration, thank you very much. Again, I would go back and check the exact credit for it, but since I'm not making this my real postcard, I'm not going to worry about it. This is just for you guys to see how the images come into Animatron. So that's about it. For you people out there who have a lot more questions for me, what you can do is go to feedback@animatron.com. That one either. Go to feedback@animatron.com, create an email for us with any of your questions, comments, or suggestions really for our next webinar topic for next Wednesday. I believe I already have a topic selected for next week. I think we're going to go over self-drawing lines. A lot of people have questions about making this, making text look as if it is being drawn onto the canvas. So there are some things that we can do for that. It is a very tedious process, so a lot of people would be interested in seeing how text can automatically draw onto your screen. So we'll get into that further next week, next Wednesday, again at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So for those of you who are left in our in our stream here, we'll open up the live Q&A session for you guys to ask your questions. So go ahead and type your questions in the chat, and I'll answer them as best I can. So in the meantime, again, make sure to animate your Halloween, your animated holiday postcard for our contest, and submit that by the 23rd of October by midnight. And make sure that you make it really cool, haunted Halloween style. You add some fun little animation in there. And also, there's a little section in there if you want to add a little pop scare for us. That would be really clever. And we can't wait to see how you guys choose to use that aspect of the postcard. So again, ask any questions you want in chat, and I'll try to answer those as best as I can for you. But other than that, thank you guys for sitting through for this long. I know we went well over time here, but it's been fun trying to create this little demo for you. And make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and just keep going through the process of looking at our tutorials and looking through our blog and looking through all the questions and cool answers that people have come up with on our forum. And you can find all of that just by going to animatron.com. Right? So you can click on our forum, discover everything that's posted there. Look at all the other questions that people have. Go to our tutorials page, look at all our official tutorials, and this will give you a better idea of how to get yourself started creating these animations using Animatron. And look forward to looking at your postcards and seeing what you guys come up with. So thank you very much for your time. Have a good week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Goodbye, everybody.